Hey everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today I'm going to be talking about a very controversial vehicle in the game, and that is the Tier 10 Soviet tank destroyer, the Object 268 version 4. This is the latest Tier 10 vehicle in World of Tanks. It came in along with the Object 705A, which is a rear turreted mounted Tier 10 Soviet heavy tank, which hasn't really had nearly the same impact. And of course the Object 430 as well, which, while it has been influential in the game, I don't think it's even coming close to doing what the Object 268 version 4 is. And there's so much talk about this tank being completely overpowered, and I just wanted to pitch in my opinion. Now, without spoiling the video, and you guys, oh, I've heard of what his opinion is, it can go off now in the first minute. Yes, I do think that this tank is very much overtuned right now, and for a variety of reasons. When I did my preview of this vehicle, I said that it would be very, very good in the right situation. And one thing that I guess I didn't consider at the time is that this vehicle has the speed and the flexibility to be able to get it into those situations pretty much every single time. And yeah, it's just got too much mobility for something that has such a big gun. Now, I'm not going to oversell the gun on this vehicle. The gun it's okay. It's a tier 10, it's kind of more of a tier 9.5 tank destroyer gun. To be fair, the gun that's on the Object 704 is better than this vehicle, and there are lots of guns on tier 9 tank destroyers that are superior than that of the 268 version 4. This vehicle has 650 alpha damage, a worse rate of fire than all of the other tier 10 tank destroyers that have 750 alpha, and it's also got really bad accuracy, the worst accuracy of any of the tier 10 tanks. Tier 10 tank destroyers. But this accuracy of 0.42, since I've been playing with it, and especially since I did a showcase on the vehicle yesterday and I played it about 20 times, is just, it doesn't really matter. And this is one thing that I'm starting to realize, is that fair enough, if you're trying to absolutely pinpoint snipe some weak points on the enemy tanks at miles away, the accuracy can be influential in World of Tanks. But for the most part, it doesn't seem to even really matter all that much. And 0.42 on this vehicle, I've still managed to be 90% accurate with this tank. And that's the only weak point on the front of the vehicle, really, which is absolutely ludicrous when we think about it. But both of the Object 268 version 4, myself, and also the 268 version 4 on the other team, we're just preloading heat to be able to fire at the weak point as well, huh? Yeah. Okay, so as I was saying, it just doesn't really feel that 0.42 accuracy matters that much. I've still managed to hit 90% of my shots in this tank. I've got better accuracy in this vehicle than I do in something like a Stridsvagn 103B, which is the most accurate tank in the game. Although, I guess you could argue with the Stridsvagn 103B, I'm taking more chancy shots, whereas this vehicle, it's usually quite close quarters combat, well, pretty much mostly close quarters combat, and you can't really miss at point blank range. But bear with me, I'm going to be showing you some more gameplay on the vehicle, and you judge about its sniping capabilities at mid to long range as well. So, oh my word, I was worried that the Centurion behind me was going to push me up over the ridgeline there. I thought I had a little bit of a troll behind me, but luckily, not quite. Now you see me reversing here, and that's something I'd like to touch on this vehicle, is that this tank, for some reason, gets to reverse at 23. Oh no, sorry, is it 23 or 22? It is 22 kilometers an hour. And that's just absolutely ludicrous. That means that, for example, let's say you're in a Mouse or a Type 5 Heavy, you can't actually get around this tank. It just reverses at the same faster than you'll be able to go forwards. And there's quite a few vehicles that, you know, the whole weakness of a tank destroyer is that when you get into close quarters combat with it, if you manage to get its flank, or if you manage to double track it, you have a huge advantage against it, that just can't seem to manage to get around the vehicle because it can go backwards so quickly. And while its traverse speed isn't fantastic in any regards, it just seems to be able to reverse and then slowly turn its gun towards you, and there's not much you can do about it unless you want to double track it. And it just feels that most players are having a hard time double tracking this tank. And while I personally don't have the biggest problem when I'm fighting these vehicles, I just see them as 650 alpha, hopefully maybe I can get it to ricochet, or I'll just take the 650 damage and hopefully I can then lock it down. If this tank decides to do this to you, there's just really not much you can do about it. Just not at all. Look at me bullying him. I ram him for 182 with the tiniest little love bump because this vehicle weighs 80 tons. Well, its max load is 80, its total weight is 75 tons. And in less than 5 minutes, we're pretty much able to completely dominate one of the flanks, take out the two most dangerous players on the enemy team in their top tier tanks, and then just be so nonchalant with our positioning and our facing because we've just got so much faith in this absolute redonkulous armor. Now, the crazy thing about the armor on this tank is that while its lower plate is not exactly thick, look how well angled it is. And I'm talking about the lower plate here, and so quite often people will be at this kind of a position and they'll aim down at the lower plate and then it will bounce off. And this plate along here is like 330 or 340 millimeters thick, so unless you're kind of like a tier 10 tank destroyer with a premium round, you're not going through that. Now, this upper plate isn't the thickest, but you see how well angled it is? Unless you're literally above the vehicle shooting down on it, or a very tall tank with some gun depression, you're not going through here either. And even the side is a massive challenge for most tier 8 and tier 9 vehicles that aren't firing premium rounds, and this little weak point on top is still 250 millimeters thick, and so that means that all tier 8s and tier 9s are pretty much having to fire premium rounds to even have higher than a 50-50 chance of going through the supposed weak point. And this armor just allows you to make absolutely ridiculous, crazy donkey plays like this. What you're seeing me doing here is pretty much, I think it was either at about 10 or 11 at night at the end of a 6-hour stream, and I just really couldn't give a darn anymore and was really trying to push the vehicle as far as I could take it. I drove up over a ridge, and it feels like I still get back with far too many of my hit points, already having blocked 2,000 damage this game, including from a tier 10 tank destroyer there on the T110E4. I'm not actively trying to defend my vehicle, and only one armor piercing round went in and one high explosive round there from the tier 10 American tank destroyer. It's the mobility. It just seems to get where it wants to go, and yet just absolutely destroys things when it gets there. They have little chance of being able to penetrate it in return. Let's just sit out in front of pretty much the entirety of the enemy team here. We're bouncing the T10 and the Mauerbrecher, even though we're not really angling our armor towards them. One Lerber manages to penetrate us, but the other E75 bounces off. And I'm thinking, okay, maybe reverse out of the way of the T110E4 that we managed to snipe in the top of the tank. And finally, he manages to actually hit one up into the lower plate there, but that was because he was firing an APCR round, so he's got 375 millimeters of penetration. If he wasn't firing an APCR round there, then he would probably only be like a 50-50 to go through, or even worse than a 50-50 to go through the plate from that angle, because that lower plate is indeed 300 millimeters thick. And that's its raw thickness. When I was talking about the 330 to 340, that was its effective armor if you're on a level playing field aiming at it. If you're aiming down underneath it at the perfect possible angle for this vehicle, you're still going to get through 300 millimeters of protection. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is that when I first did my preview on this vehicle, I thought that maybe the .42 accuracy would be a big deciding factor, or the fact that the tank's DPM is not incredible and it doesn't have that tier 10 tank destroyer DPM to be able to win those long range engagements. You know, those really long drawn out games on Prokhorovka or Malinovka where two teams just stand opposite each other and fire off. But that just hasn't been the case. I guess because you can kind of play this as if it's a heavy. And when we take a look at the win ratios of heavy tanks and tank destroyers, in just a second, I'll show you in the post-game stats, it's not even nearly balanced about how impactful heavy tanks can be in the game compared to tank destroyers. And so I guess this is pretty much the nearest thing to playing a heavy tank, apart from something maybe like a T110E4, but the T110E4 is statistically kind of irrelevant in today's matchup and meta, and its armor isn't even usable really in a tier 10 game. Sometimes against tier 8 and tier 9 opponents you can get away with the T110E4, but having the cupola, well, the machine gun port weakness on top of that tank and the cheeks and the lower plate, it really just has got too many downsides. So within the first 4 minutes of this game, it's just been a complete whitewash, and while we do have a few more green players on our team than the enemy team, I just feel like I couldn't have played this any worse. And here's the bar. Just the bar has been completely lowered for the kind of quality of play that you have to have in a tier 10 tank to still be influential in the game. You can just drive around like some massive derp, and by the end of 4 minutes you've got 7,000 damage combined. And every time I've been inspecting players that I've seen driving the Object 268 version 4, I have yet to see a player who is not doing the most damage they've ever done on average in a tier 10 tank, and also their win ratio being higher than any of their other tier 10 vehicles. And so it's kind of no surprise that out of the 11 tier 10 tank destroyers in the game, there are only 2 that have higher than 50% win ratio. And yeah, in the last 30 days, the Object 268 version 4 is nearly 7% higher than second best, and pretty much 10% better than the average win ratio for some of the mid to lower tier 10 tank destroyers. And while originally you could argue that the reason why the win ratio of this tank would have been really high on initial launch of the tank was because all the best players were playing in the vehicle to get their ace tankers or marks of excellence, it's now been in the game for at least, what, 2 to 3 months now? And it's showing no signs of dropping in win ratio. In fact, it's kind of accelerating up. And the same can be said that if we look at the average damage that the vehicle is doing, it's over 400 higher than any of the other tier 10 tank destroyers. And that's bizarre when you think that surely this was meant to be the tier 10 tank destroyer that had the lower DPM, the lower alpha damage, the poor accuracy that made it miss lots of its shots. Well, no, that's not the case either. It's got the highest on average accuracy as well. I guess because everybody's just YOLOing in using the top speed of the tank to fire at point blank range and using that ridiculous armor to be able to just sit there in the pocket in front of vehicles with immunity that only other tanks like the T110E3 could have dealt with. And in fact, if we organize it by shots received without taking damage, the Object 268 version 4 is now trumping the T110E3 significantly, as well as the Badger, the Jagdpanzer E100, and the T110E4. So in light of this, what kind of changes could Wargaming make to this vehicle without absolutely destroying it? Well, firstly, I think the reverse speed is just a little too high, and probably the top speed as well. I would maybe reduce this down to 50 or to 45, and lower the reverse speed to probably about 18 to at least give some mediums and even the slow heavies a chance to flank it before it turns itself towards you or just reverses away from you. I personally wouldn't really change anything about the armor apart from perhaps making the weak point on top more of an opportunity for people who don't want to have to fire premium rounds. But I think enough of a nerf to the mobility of the vehicle, maybe in conjunction with changing the aim time of the tank from being a fabulous 2 seconds, which means it doesn't even really have to aim, might be enough to tune down a vehicle that is frankly just not very balanced in the game currently. But I'd be very interested to hear what you think in the comments down below. Do you think the vehicle is completely fine the way it is? Or do you think it's tuned a little too high, and what changes would you make to the vehicle to kind of rebalance it and still keep its role of being an assault tank destroyer? And so that's it for today, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up, but if you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.